That's the Joe West podcast. Country Joe, he just retired, most umpired games ever. Lot to talk about with Mr. West. There's his podcast, which will be a hit, I promise you that. It just debuted there a couple days ago, and he says hello. Joe, welcome. Good to have you with us again, Christopher Russo. How nervous were you at third base in '76 for your first ever game?
You know, I don't know that I felt a nervousness because, I had played college football in front of a bunch of people, and I had already worked spring training with the National League, and I didn't feel a nervousness. You know, one of the greatest compliments one of the umpires ever gave me was Andy Olson. He said, "You're the only guy that ever came up here. You weren't in awe of what was going on when you got here." And I kind of attribute that to when I played football in college. I was playing against people who were trying to rip my head off. You know what I mean? So it was not one of those things where I was really nervous because I was just trying to concentrate on what I had to do. And so I really was happy to get there at such a young age. And I was really lucky that I had the background of playing sports before I got there. So I really wasn't that nervous.
And it's fascinating. Yeah, and it's fascinating. Your last game is the wild card game last year, which was an absolute classic with the game-winning home run in the bottom of the ninth. That's one heck of a game to go out on, Joe. Give me some, basically 40 years later, 45 years later, and you have Cards in L.A. with an absolutely tremendous game in the ninth. Let me hear your thoughts on that. Go ahead.
Well, I kind of thought that was going to be my last game because I didn't see my name on the list to follow. So I figured that was going to be my last game. So I thought, well, you better be good because they're going to remember you for your last call. They're not going to remember you for the next one. And I had good pitching. They both played well. You know, the Cardinals made a real run at it at the end of the season just to get there. And the Dodgers, they won over 100 games, and they didn't even win their division. So I had two great teams playing at the same time, and they both played well. I mean, it was unique because it was a special game for everybody involved. I mean, the Cardinals, if you look at it realistically, probably shouldn't even been there, and the Dodgers shouldn't have been playing either because normally when you win over 100 games, you win your division. So it was a special night. And I tell people all the time, those games are harder to work than a World Series game because it's only 1 and out. You don't have a chance to make it up if you lose the first game because that's it. So those games, there's a lot more pressure on you than a regular league championship game or a World Series. So
unless it's a game 7. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Unless it's a game. Do you remember I looked it up. Well, we looked it up, not me. But your first ejections, 77, Steve Henderson and our good buddy Joe Torre. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it because Torre came out and said, "Stevie doesn't talk like that." I said, "Well, he did today." And so, but I can honestly remember when it happened. It was a ball and strike call, and he got mad and he said something obscene, and I threw him out, and then Joe came out, and you got to realize Joe Torre was a different guy then because he was a player manager, and he was and it's hard for people when I tell people I had Joe Torre as a player, they say you're not that old, and I try to tell them you're right, I'm not. So, but anyway. And over the years, you look back on that and say that was the beginning. And somebody said, "You kicked out more people than anybody." I said, "No, that's not true. I'm over 100 behind the guy that has the most ejections." So, but Torre was a hard-nosed player, a hard-nosed manager, and when he took over as our boss, he realized what we had to do. And he embraced it, and he and I had conversations because I was president of the union at the time, and we would talk about things to help give the umpires confidence and stuff like that. So he worked hard at his managerial, both as a manager of players and as well as a manager of the umpires. So I kind of applaud him for trying to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Made the transition well. Do the umpires? I wouldn't, because to me it's the fun part of the job. Do the umpires want a computer-based strike zone, or would they rather call their own balls and strikes?
Well, I think they'd rather call their own balls and strikes, because you fail to realize the downside of the computer calling the pitches is it misses about 7% of the pitches. And so baseball is going to expect the umpire to make up for those 7% that the machine misses. Now, when I say it misses a pitch, it's not like an umpire calling a pitch and you disagreed whether it was inside or outside or up or down. When this machine or this robot misses a pitch, it doesn't call anything. So what do you do when you're 3-2 pitch and the base is loaded and the machine doesn't track the pitch? There's already enough pressure on umpires when they have to call these pitches. Now you're going to make them call a pitch that the computer couldn't call. I don't think that's fair in any realm of trying to get this stuff right. And granted, when this first started, the replay system, when it first started, the umpires were a little bit against it until they realized that replay is trying to help them get every call correct. And the umpires embrace that. They are all trying to get every call correct. So I don't think the umpires are against a robotic umpire, but if you want the robotic umpire to work, then it has to be able to call check swings. It has to be able to call foul tips. It has to determine is the pitcher throwing at the hitter or not throwing at the hitter. I mean, this is a game of success and failures. And the umpires are the people on the field that have the most successes in what they're trying to do. We don't have an umpire that grades lower than 95% on his zone evaluation. They've already proven that the robot misses 7% of its pitches. So
our worst problem. I didn't realize that.
Our worst umpire, our very worst umpire is 2% better than the machine right now. Now, when you get the machine where it doesn't miss anything, then we have something to talk about. But the biggest problem with that robot right now is it misses more pitches than the umpires that you have hired to do the job.
Interesting. All right, one last quickie. When you umpire games, how many of the players know who you are? 50%, 60%? I always ask the NBA officials that. Half the players have no idea who the officials are, and they travel with them and do 1 million games all year. How many of the players, know what your first name was? 50% of an active game? How many, Joe?
Well, I would guess as long as I worked, they all knew my name. But I can remember when I first came up, when you were just working one league or the other league, I came up as a National League umpire. And when I came up, the players would ask the other players who had a new umpire, what's he like? Can you talk to him? Does he do things different? Can you say anything to him? Can you argue with him? And this, that, and the other. And I can remember John Kibler walked over to me in Atlanta and he says, "Did you kick out 50 players in the minor leagues last year?" And I said, "No, absolutely not." And he says, "Well, they think you did, so don't tell them any different."
We got less grief. I'm looking forward to that podcast because you got lots of personality. Always a pleasure, Joe. Keep up the good work. Appreciate you coming on today. Enjoy retirement as well.